Hello and welcome. As always, we'll give just a moment or two for Zoom attendees to join the meeting and then we'll get started. Thank you. I call this special business meeting and workshop of the South Breeze School Board to order. We will begin with our land acknowledgement, for which I will turn over to Director Jackson.
Thank you. South Moody School District acknowledges that this is Indigenous land. This is the land of the Snohomish people and land that was culturally and spiritually important to many tribes, including the Snohomish, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, many speakers of the Lushootseed language family, tribes of the Lower Skagit, and tribes collectively associated with the Tulalip tribes today. Our Indigenous people of this place have stewarded this land and these waters for uncountable generations, and their deep and enduring ties to this place are part of what makes it so rich and so abundant today. We owe them a great gratitude for the stewardship that they have shown to this land, and please join me in expressing both that gratitude and curiosity and appreciation for the tribal cultures that continue to shape our culture and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since this is a special business session, rather than a normal one, there is no specific public comment period for this. Once we suspend the business session and move into workshop, we will go into our usual workshop format where we welcome and invite commentary from the community on the topics on the agenda. We'll move directly into new business now. We have a few items to get through quickly that are time sensitive. So first of all, Memorandum 2324-57, approval of bond general contractor construction management, GCCM. Since we did, we'll open up for discussion, and since we did not approve the agenda for this at the beginning, we will need a motion to move to voting on each of these items. But we will start with discussion. I will turn it over to Dr. Moshe first for some explanation.
As the board knows, we entered into the GCCM process, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Paul to walk you through where we came from and where we are tonight.
Yeah, so it was a three-step process. There was 5 of us on the panel: our architect, Jeff Ludeman from Integris, Dr. Moshe, myself, Scott. I'm sorry. There's 5 people on the selection panel: Dr. Moshe, myself, Scott Peacock, Director Jackson, and Jeff Ludeman from our architecture firm Integris. It was a 3-step process where we received a paper proposal that we reviewed and scored. Then we were invited 3 firms to come forward for an interview process, and that interview was scored individually. And then the final process is the pricing component. That was, we brought 2 firms forward, and that was Absher and BN Builders. And after that process, it was as close as anyone's ever seen it. It was decided by 7/100ths of a point, and Absher came out on top. So it goes beyond the pricing. It's a 3-step component. The scoring is now visible on the screen. As we dove deeper into the pricing component of it, there were some sections that raised questions, but it still didn't really change the final outcome. There's a section called general specified conditions that one of the firms entered a $0 amount. And in those terms and conditions, there's things like travel, security, background checks, obviously things that have cost. So if this would have gone the opposite direction, we would have really had to scrutinize that. But as the formula fell, Absher came out on top, and recommend moving forward with Absher. They're going to be a great firm. We have their superintendent on the call or in the audience tonight virtually. We're excited to get started, and after if this is approved to move forward, we're scheduled to start a meeting tomorrow to start kicking things off to start delivering the bond. Are there any further questions?
Any questions, comments, discussion, debate from the board?
Quick clarifying question. Which of the two bids was the one that had a 0 on that line item?
BN Builders.
Thank you.
And that was a public opening of the documents. The documents are available for request if folks would like to see them.
Given that the pricing ended up becoming functionally like a tiebreaker, do you feel that both bids were in the range of industry standard in terms of cost?
Yeah, yes. And that percentage is very, very good. That percentage fee, there was speculation that was going to be north of 3%. So when we opened them, they were both in the 2s. Everyone was very pleasantly surprised. Some of that general condition pricing was a little lower than expected from BN, but Absher fell right into the ballpark of what we were expecting for those additional costs. So.
I see. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Let's get advisory votes from our student representatives, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we do need a motion for this. Is there a motion on this memorandum?
I will move to approve.
Thank you. And we are a small board, we do not need a second. All those in favor of approving memorandum 232457, approval of the bond general contractor construction management, GCCM, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum has passed. We will go with the recommended company. Thank you. Memorandum 232458, approval of resolution number 689, declaring an emergency exists and directing the school district to perform flood remediation and repair of associated property damage at South Woodbury High School. I'll turn this over to you again, Dr. Moshe, for some explanation.
As the board knows, we had a flood in the high school, and I'm actually going to let Mr. Peacock share all of the gory details, and then Mr. Field will talk about the emergency declaration.
Okay, thank you. And the gory details illustrate exactly why this is vital. This is a vital resolution in front of you. Last Monday morning, I got a call that the gym floor was flooded from one of the high school custodians. Went over, and probably about 90% of the gym floor was under about 1/4 of an inch of water. So got on the phone, and this is not a time to monkey around. You get on the phone and you bring in mitigators to come in and help address the water issues, and was able to get in touch with Resolution 1 out of Oak Harbor, who were down here they got their people in at 8 o'clock and got down here. We're here by 9:30 actually. So, they were here within an hour and a half of getting their people. Very appreciative. By the time they got here, we actually had the water off the floor. And now, thanks to all hands on deck, custodians coming in off duty and equipment, Dr. Moshe mopping, all of us in administration with squeegees on the floor. And so it was quite a sight, but we got it done. So anyway, but the mitigators came in and immediately started getting dryers out. They had 30 of the Snell dryers on the floor and had 5 dehumidifiers. We were hoping at that point that we might be able to, by some remote chance, save the gym floor. And as it turned out, that wasn't going to be the case after a few days of looking at the floor as it continued to deteriorate. But we had them come in, they started drying the rooms, the mechanical room where the leak, and let me step back. The leak originated from a water heater in a mechanical room that was on the other side of a foyer on I want to say the east side of the gym in the back side of the school. And the water probably, we figure, started to come out of that room. The leak probably happened somewhere around midnight Saturday night, in the middle of the night Saturday. So we had a good 36 hours where the water was running out onto that floor through those doors and into the gym. It also flooded a couple of other adjoining rooms connected to the girls' locker room right off that space. And so sheetrock was pretty well decimated in those areas, soaked. Mitigators began tearing that out within a day. Got the water off the floor, of course, right away. And, you know, unfortunately, we didn't have any electrical damage, but we're going to have to replumb. We're going to have to get the water heater out. We've got to demolish the water heater. We have to tear out the sheetrock in that mechanical room behind the water heater. It's a 500-gallon water heater. It's mammoth from 1980. It's got to be torched, and it's going to have torches and take it apart. But anyway, so the mitigators have been doing all that work so far in terms of getting the sheetrock out. They began tearing up the floor last week once the decision was made, and once we realized that the floor could not be salvaged. We called the flooring people. I called Roger Mortensen from DS Hardwoods the first day. He came out the next day and was able to take a look at the floor and give us some sense of what was likely to happen, which turned out to be true. The floor was going to continue to cup and curl, and it did. And he gave us a lot of advice in terms of how we might just think about this process moving forward, about the bleachers, for example. When we start to have to tear up the floor, we have to think about what are we going to do with the floor under the bleachers. That's also had moisture levels reading between 30 and 60%. Those days. It was up to 80% in some parts of the other parts of the floor in the middle of the gym where it was pooling. And so we had to decide, we had to get bleacher people, and I had to call Northwest Installation Enterprises. I called a couple of companies, and they were the ones who everything came back to that could help us. They arranged their schedule. I called them Thursday, and they were able to get their schedule switched around on Monday so that they could come in this week and move those bleachers off that side of the floor onto the concrete. Once we had pulled the floor up, the bleachers came down onto the concrete, and then the mitigators could start tearing up the maple flooring over on the sides of the gymnasium. So what I'm illustrating here is that there's a progression. You get on a slippery slope, and you've got to move quickly, because once you start to get mold in the space, then you're at a whole nother level of mitigation and health and safety issues that have to be addressed. And it becomes a situation where future flooring can be compromised. So all of these things we have to follow quickly, and that's what we did. We just continued to bring people in who knew what they were doing. We also, once we realized we had to tear up the floor, we immediately shifted to what does it look like to put in a new floor. So we actually reached out. DS Hardwoods is giving us a bid, but also I called Western Hardwoods as well. They're coming in, they're giving us a bid. They came in and looked at it Monday, and they're going to give us a quote as well. And then we're going to review those and come up with the best option for us. We're going to also have to look at the types of flooring and installations. So insurance has been involved in this that's all right. That's okay. Yeah, I was getting there. I was trying to illustrate the procurement part of it first. But so the result of this is from the very beginning, Paul was in touch with our risk management pool. And he and I have been working with risk management throughout. They've been reviewing quotes as we're able to get those from the mitigation company, from the flooring companies, from the bleacher people. Everybody along the way has been providing us with quotes, and we've been submitting those to the insurance company and going through a process where we're reviewing those quotes and making sure that we're getting the value for the money and that the insurance is going to cover it, because that is critical. They are providing us with the parameters in which we then can agree to what contractors are proposing with confidence that we are going to be reimbursed for those dollars when we submit those that for payment from the insurance company, which will likely be at the end. And I'm going to let Paul talk about the financial piece of that later.
Thank you, Scott. So what the resolution does, it allows us to procure these items, because even though it's an insurance claim, we still have bid thresholds and items like that we would have to follow. Without this resolution, we would have to have formal bids, which is just going to delay the process. And as Scott spoke to, we're already getting quotes to be as frugal as we can and make sure we're getting the best deal. But there may become a time where we need stuff to get done more expediently to try to get this gym back open as quickly as possible. This resolution allows us to circumvent some of the RCWs by declaring this as an emergency, so we can move forward if we have something that we need the timing doesn't allow for us to have a full-on bid process. And with the advice of our insurance adjuster, this helps us allow him to approve that insurance is going to pay for it and move forward with whoever we select to perform the service to get it installed. So that's why we've brought this for front of you, because it's a requirement to circumvent those RCW. Circumvent's the wrong term. To allow us to not follow, set aside the RCWs. Once we declare it an emergency, we have the authority by the state to do so. Yeah, go ahead.
And I just want to add one more thing. We're also in a place right now where we're having to compete for a limited amount of resources, things like Maple. 2 other schools had floods last week in Western Washington, or have to replace their flooring. So we're competing with limited resources and have to move quickly on that as well in order to be able to get the best price and be able to move forward quickly.
So big thank you to Scott and Paul specifically. In addition, our hope, and John can speak to this a little bit more, but we have to relocate, obviously, any fall sports, specifically volleyball. All of the volleyball equipment was also damaged and has to be replaced, also an insurance issue. So they're relocating, and our goal, if we're lucky, is that basketball season can be played in the high school, middle school, high school gym. So it's a big deal. We do have policy that allows for emergency, and that's why we've been able to do what we could so far. But this really gives us the opportunity to move as quickly as we need to move. John.
Yeah, just real quickly, it changes some logistics, obviously. So John Summer is going to be our brand new athletic director. So I always told him there's a summer surprise. So here it is. So we've already been working with the community center. So we're going to have games and practices over there, because not only we're going to have 2, maybe 3 high school teams, but we will have probably 3 middle school teams. We're talking with Scott also about transportation of our kids after school getting to the community center. So we also probably need to spruce up the community center gym floor a little bit. It's still got some charm, but we need to fix the floor up a little bit and make it look nice. So I think we have a plan.
And bringing that floor up to be able to have competition on whatever we need to do will be covered by insurance. So all costs we have to incur transporting kids down to the center, all of that we have to pay to make this happen, to keep our student athletes able to do what they need to do, the insurance will cover all additional costs we have to incur.
Effectively like getting a rental car from the insurance company if your car gets totaled.
And it's not just athletics. I'm worried about PE, 6 through 12 PE, because now we're can only have 1 gym. And hopefully we have a very nice fall so our kids can go outside, but worried about inclement weather. But we'll work together with Kayla and our PE teachers coming up with a schedule.
Comments, question, discussion from the board?
I have a comment, which is thank you and oh dear and wow. So I'm so sorry and so grateful. That's a really big deal. And it sounds like you got on it fast with all the right steps, and I'm very grateful. I have a question which is super tangential and super unimportant. So treat it as a rhetorical question if you prefer. But I know that gym floors can be very sentimental, especially for student athletes. And I know some people trade in old gym floors. So the ones that haven't been damaged go for top dollar. I'm just curious if it's worth saving a few of the least damaged boards and offering them to the shop class for potential heirloom picture frames or something that might be.
Yeah, we're on that.
Okay, right on. Thank you.
First thing I did is texted Mr. Green, our shop teacher. Some community members have local people that can make end tables like that, because I want that all recycled. Because even though some of it's buckled, you can still plane it, make good use of it. And
That is great news.
being a former basketball player, it saddens me to see an old floor not being recycled.
Yeah, that's really great news. I tried to buy an old piece of gym floor for a small space, and it was thousands of dollars, more than I could afford. So it does have future value.
And the company that removed also, they say there's a chunk, probably about, I don't know, about 6 by 8 with an SW on it 2 chunks. And so they saved that. So we're going to do something with that also.
Well, maybe that'll fit into our remodel decor.
Yeah, it takes those boards, just so you know, many of them are warped. They also have a nail every 18 inches that's not easily removed. There's also finish on them and wax on them. And so it's a labor of love if people want to do that. But yeah, there is a huge pile behind the high school. Huge.
I was running by there today actually, and I was like, whoa, I thought the bond wasn't going this summer. What happened while I was in Italy? But not the bond. I was wondering too, so about the floor, I presume that the SW is gone. Are we going to have to choose a new design for the floor then? And when would that be like going on?
I've already thought about that. And there's definitely, I'd like to mix it up a little bit. And obviously we want student input.
Because yeah, students would love to be involved in that.
And remember, it's not just Falcons. We also have Cougars that play there too. So we can incorporate that.
I could picture maybe like a hippogriff.
Yeah. The other thing we're talking about, again, this would not be covered by insurance, but if we're going to be in there and stripping it out like that, can we make sure that we can get it painted and really have a brand new gymnasium? Something totally unexpected, but tremendous pride for many, many years to come. So all of those things are part of the conversation. How far we get is yet to be determined. There you go.
I've got a couple questions, but first, thank you for your quick action. It sounds like despite how big of a catastrophe this was, it could have been worse if it went undetected and unremediated for longer. My first question is about root cause analysis. Do we know why this happened, and are we making sure that it doesn't happen elsewhere on district property?
Yes. I have a pretty good idea. Well, I know what happened. The plumbing failed around the water heater, which was interesting because I just had Morgan Mechanical and I'd already identified 8 water heaters in the district that needed to be replaced with the associated plumbing and valves around it needing to be replaced. So this was just a nasty kick in the shins the week after we did that walkthrough on all that. Hey, don't forget, I'm here. You're not going to beat me, you know. So the water heater beat me on that one. Yes, so we're going to be going through and replacing all the oldest water heaters and the plumbing around that. Also, the other thing that I suspect happened was we had the water shut off on Friday because we were doing some work to upgrade the pump house across the road, and the commercial fire pumps came on. And they raised the pressure in the domestic lines. And I believe, though it didn't blow out at that point, I believe it weakened an already failing pipe at that point, and that it gave way over the weekend. And so we're also addressing the issues at the pump house already as well, but we're going to continue that work.
Thank you. My next question is about insurance. I admit ignorance on this. Do we have a deductible? Does our premium go up? How does the risk pool insurance work after a claim like this?
There is a deductible, but everything has to be approved by our adjuster. He's already been on site. He was on site the day that we had the hardwood floor guys there, and he was the one that declared it a total loss. He was the one that gave us the go ahead with restoration 1 to start getting it tore out. So there is a deductible. I don't know offhand what our deductible is. Joe may know offhand.
I don't know the deductible offhand, but this is a risk pool. So all members of the pool basically share the load. And so it depends, right? If everybody had a flood, or if it just depends. And we won't know that. But remember, our insurance has gone up 15%, right? For everyone. And we are a low risk district. So insurance cost has not been met by MSOCs in this state. Insurance costs go up 15%. The MSOCs went up, less than 2%. So we pay for it one way or another. So insurance will cover the cost of all of this. But again, our premium is nowhere near what this is really going to end up costing.
And
Thank you.
just to add to that, this incident would not impact our rate necessarily with the risk pool. The risk pool determines that rate based on the collective whole of all of the districts. So we could have no incidences and our rate could still go up.
Got it. Thank you.
So we work with our adjuster to approve everything before we move forward. So he gives us, yes, this is adequate coverage or quote or description, move forward, it'll be covered. From some volleyball equipment that got soiled, we already have that out the door and it should be here in a couple weeks. They gave the go ahead. So that's where Scott and I work together. So he's gathering quotes, and if Slade says we need another one, then we grab another one. But this resolution allows us, once he basically says this is adequate, we'll cover it, we can go forward. In RCW, that may require us to get a second or third or fourth quote to meet that threshold, puts that aside and allows us to keep moving forward. And we're only moving forward once we hear confirm that it's going to be covered with our insurance.
Okay, any other questions, discussion, debate? I'm going to do it in a different order this time. Do I hear a motion on this item?
I move to approve.
Okay, could I have advisory votes from our student representatives, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving Memorandum 232458, approval of resolution number 689, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum has passed. Our final item of business tonight within the business meeting, Memorandum 232459, approval of the 2024-2025 agreement with NWESD. Dr. Moshe, would you like to describe that, please?
It's essentially the same agreement we sign on an annual basis. These contracts are now 1 year at a time, and that has an auditing implication, and that's why we do them this way.
Any comments, questions, discussion from the board? Okay, do I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve.
Okay, student representatives, do I have advisory votes on Memorandum 232459?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving Memorandum 232459, approval of the 2024-2025 agreement with NWESD, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. The memorandum has passed. Thank you very much. We will now suspend the special business meeting and go into our workshop format. Once again, this is the time at which we invite community members either here or on Zoom to chime in and join the discussion. If there is someone on Zoom who would like to join in, please use the Q&A function to note your name and location first, just so we know to pause discussion so that you can comment on it. And please do comment in full ideas rather than just like, I agree or I disagree, because we may have moved on since you typed it. Thank you very much. We will now begin with the first item on our workshop agenda, which is the superintendent search. We'd like to welcome HYA here. Thank you very much for coming out to talk with us.
Just by way of introduction, Chris McDuffie and Helene Paroff are here with us tonight, and both are experienced Washington administrators, and it's an exciting time for the district. So I want to thank them both for being here.
And you're the expert, so we'll turn this over to you.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you. We were honored to be selected as your search firm for this really critical decision you have in front of you. So you have a packet that was just shared, just a couple items that we wanted to walk through as we start to launch this process and nail down some of the logistics involved. And we really appreciate the opportunity to meet with each of you one-on-one earlier today. It was just a real pleasure. So that was our official launch to the engagement phase. And if you'll remember from our proposal and from our interview, we approach this process in 4 phases. And the first 2 are launched simultaneously. So as I mentioned, we launched engagement today, and we have 10 one-on-one interviews already under our belt. So we're well underway. So engagement is the first phase, followed right again alongside recruitment. And we're going to talk about that. We're very excited to get this posting out hopefully by tomorrow, based on our discussion tonight. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So those are those first 2 phases. And then of course we move into selection process, and we've got some materials here to talk through that with you and propose a calendar. It's been a pleasure already working with Joe and Christy. My goodness, they are on it. And so we so appreciate their support and look forward to working with them moving forward. So the third the third phase being selection, then finally transition. As we mentioned in our proposal, we are in it for the long haul, and we want to ensure a very successful transition. And we're going to walk alongside you as long as it takes to ensure a really smooth new beginning for you. But those are the 4 phases. So your first item is the agenda in your packet, and if you look at the multiple pages, looks a little daunting, but some of this is, pretty quick direction that we need from you. And then we have a couple other supplemental items that are for reference mostly, as well as a draft of the announcement that many of you weighed in on already. Thank you for your edits and suggestions, and so we'll decide where we want to go from here with those as well. But if you can start with the agenda, which again is just kind of the numbered items. Wanted to kick it off with, again, sharing our appreciation. Helene is just joining our Washington HYA team, and so she's observing tonight, and she's a very experienced administrator from Washington State, working on both sides of the mountain, working as an assistant executive director for WASA for many, many years, and an assistant SOUP in Eastern Washington. So comes with a vast experience, and so well respected across our whole state. So we really appreciate Helene taking time tonight too to join us. John Bash will be working primarily with me and couldn't be here tonight. So again, thanks for being here as well, Helene. First of all, we wanted to talk about how important communication is and transparency in this process. And we know that this board values that. So we appreciate that as well as a firm. And what we would propose is that you appoint or anoint a liaison, a board liaison, or 2, depending on your preference, that our team can work closely with. We like to have a standing weekly touch base just to say, here's what's going on, any questions, and we may need a little bit of direction here and there, but it's just a really helpful way for us to stay in touch. So I would just kick this off with saying, do you have a preference? Oftentimes it is the board president or board chair and or another backup board member, but 2 at the most, obviously, that can be the leads for communication. However, we commit to making sure that the whole board and of course the whole staff and community are well informed all along the journey. So rest assured that whatever we decide in these weekly conversations will be shared out as we move along. But could we start by just a preference for liaisons?
Well, it would delight me. I feel my schedule is already a little overcommitted, so I would be a backup.
I actually would have an interest in being a point person for this work, just from my own perspective.
I know this isn't a Robert Rule thing, but I second Director Downs' involvement because of her deep background and experience and knowledge. And I would also have the bandwidth to do it if, you know.
I would welcome an opportunity to be a point person, but I third Andrea Downs taking on some of that responsibility. I'd be interested to hear what you think about your what you would like your part to play. Do you want to be as the board chair? Do you want to be in that lead seat?
I'm happy to be one of the two members. But I certainly don't feel the need to if Director Greenhair and Director Downs would like that role. Yeah, I could see a benefit if we need to make a decision that I am empowered to do so on behalf of the board, but I can do that with feedback from one of the two liaisons also. Yeah.
That's a first that we've seen that, that decision-making style. Yeah.
What just happened?
I don't know. Yeah, she threw up the Rochambeau, so I joined in. I'm quite willing to let you two be the liaisons if you'd like to do that. Okay.
Oh, good.
There we are. So Director Greenhair and Director Downs.
Well, thank you very much. And the next section about contact information, obviously, we wanted you to have our emails and cell phone numbers, and we could really benefit from your cell phone numbers, but we'll ask if Christy could help us with that, and we'll fill this in. Our intent is to get the notes from this meeting, this workshop, back out to you so that we are all working off of the same sheet of music here. So we'll be getting this out to you very soon after we fill that out. Item number 3 is the letter of agreement. And thank you for Dr. Moshe for facilitating that. So the letter of agreement has been initiated and signed, and we appreciate that. The confidentiality agreement for anyone who's working on this highly sensitive personnel process, we ask that you take a look at our confidentiality agreement. That's the last page in this packet. We will send you an email where you can just click, you agree, much easier. And you'll probably see that come from John Bash in just a few days. But if you have any questions or concerns about what language is in that confidentiality agreement, please reach out to us. But that's what that piece is about. So thank you for your consideration there. The search calendar draft, if we could set that aside for just a few minutes, because we really get into the weeds there, and I'd like to hit some high spots first, if you don't mind. So we're skipping ahead to page 4 and talking about that first phase that I mentioned about engagement. And as we mentioned, again, we are so committed to making sure this is an open, transparent, and inclusive process. And we know that we heard loud and clear from you that you value all voices. And we're going to do everything we can to ensure that that happens. So we've already started some initial discussions with Joe and with Christy about ways in which we can reach your constituents, whether they're staff, students, families, community members, how best to do that. And that's our work over the coming weeks. We're looking at a day or day and a half or 2 that we can just come over, immerse, and get to as many folks as we can. Some will lend themselves to small groups. Some we can do in just a large forum. It's, there's just a variety of ways. But the most important thing is that people felt they had an opportunity and that their voice was heard. So you can see the 4 components. I mean, it's interviews, which is what we were doing today, sort of one-on-one or 2 on, 1 interviews. The focus groups, so for like groups. And finally, the open forums. We could do 1 or more. It depends on what your preference is for a district this size. Maybe one evening is enough, but we also know for a lot of families, a morning might be better. So we're very flexible in order to ensure that everybody felt they had an opportunity. So those are the three components. And the fourth component, of course, is the survey. So we'll go back and talk about your options to consider. Joe?
Well, Christy and I talked about it, knowing the board's calendar. We talked about actually, and I don't know if this aligns, the idea of getting the survey out and, asking people to complete it, and then having a community forum in early October with some data to reflect back. I don't know if that fits what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, Christy and I think talked after that. And
Okay, good.
we've got
There you
a
go.
few, well, there's, we can approach it in a variety of different ways. So why don't you hold that thought until we talk about the calendar details, because we've got a couple of proposals already to consider. But thank you. When you think about the survey, some communities just would rather not do a survey. But most do. And I think when you're talking about opportunity and inclusiveness, we encourage you to consider one or the other. So one is just the simple Google survey that is those basic 3 questions, pretty easy to do and for us to manage. And that's just a part of your letter of agreement with us already. The other option is the HYA Comprehensive Staff and Community and Family Survey that gets into a lot more detail. It disaggregates information. And the reason we add it as an option for boards, a couple reasons. One, depends on where you are, for instance, in your strategic planning process. If you just went through an exhaustive strategic planning process, for instance, and you surveyed everyone to death, you may not need that level of detail. If you are where I think I heard today a few times you are, where you are ready for a refresh, maybe a year from now or so, maybe this would help to set the stage and help to inform your strategic planning refresh kickoff, for instance. So in your packet, there is just a one-sheeter that gives you just a sample of what one of the reports might look like. I can also pass around a little more detail of what the full report might look like. So you can see the price as well. Because thanks, Pauline. Our company manages it, disaggregates it, puts it into this full report. So that's coming around. John has it now, but you'll see a full report with multiple disaggregated information. And it may be helpful to you, but you can also see that it's a $2,000 price tag with Spanish language is included if you need that. And then if you have any additional languages, some communities need it to be translated in their top 5 languages. So it's obviously community specific. So you don't have to make the decision tonight. We've got some time if you want to sit with it for a little while and think about option A or B, but by body language, I'm assuming you want to do one or the other and ensure that there's a survey at least. Okay, well, take your time as that's coming around to see if that resonates with you as a more comprehensive option. Otherwise, we would be ready to launch, a Google form survey like right away, but we'll look at the calendar.
And as that's being passed around, could you note for the community watching now or watching later what those 3 basic questions on the Google
Yeah.
question?
Thank you,
survey
Brooke.
are?
Yes. And we really use the same 3 questions for whether it's a one-on-one interview, a focus group, or the full forum, because obviously we're trying to gather the themes across all the constituent groups. So the first one certainly is what's working well? What are you most proud of, right? In the school district and the community. The second one, what are the challenges and opportunities moving forward? And third, what are those qualities and characteristics you're looking for in your next superintendent? So we're consistent with those 3. Thanks for asking. Okay, so we'll come back to get some direction from you on which of those two options you'd prefer soon. The list of constituent groups, again, it sounds like Joe and Christy already have, a list of who are your, primary community and staff and family groups that we should be tapping into that really need a personal touch, a special invitation, and we're going to work with them to do that. We think that's important. We want to call people in and they have an opportunity to sit with us in person, or if they'd prefer, they can just fill out the online survey or do both. But there will be multiple opportunities. So we just want to make sure, and Christy and Joe, looking to you two, will be doing that a lot. But if you could check to see if the board had any other than are already on your list, if they have anybody else, to make sure we don't miss any particular group that's out there that you want us to reach out to. Because sometimes we're just inviting them to the forum, but a special invite goes a long way. So we'll just work with you to be specific on that. So this is just a sample list.
Quick question along that. When we look at those groups, is it possible for us to pull in specifically for families, subsect groups that could meet privately away from larger groups? I would think primarily our BIPOC families or our families who have BIPOC children, LGBTQ families, and then special education families, if they could have separate opportunities to speak to their needs in the district. I think that would be
Yes.
beneficial.
Absolutely. That's what we need to hear from you, which you think would be most appropriate. And we're going to bend over backwards to make sure that they have the right space to feel safe to share. So I appreciate that, and we'll just continue to refine the list and refine the methodology for each of those groups.
Are you asking for input on the list now, or should we move on in the interest of time?
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, if you don't mind, and I think the people that could work with you, obviously Christy and Joe, just making sure you've all put your heads together and not missed anybody, or to hear you out.
And since this is a workshop, if there are community members who know of other groups that they think should be invited, this would be an ideal opportunity to weigh in as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So like, as we mentioned, communication all along the journey is going to be critical. Again, we're going to work with Joe and Christy. They have a lot on their shoulders throughout this process. But how best to make sure that there is a dedicated space on your website, right? To make sure everybody, they know there's one-stop shop to keep it, everything up to date, the timeline, all of the
Christy's already on it,
opportunities.
so she's going to
Yeah.
pull it up for you.
That's
You
what I
can see it.
heard. I heard she's on it. Yeah, she's setting a whole new standard for, it's now a gold standard for
Mhm.
how to be organized with all of these logistics. Perfect. So that can just be the repository, and if we can tell staff and community, everybody, this is where you turn to see what's new. When's my opportunity to be heard, right? Thank you so much for doing that. In addition to that, press releases or your whatever you push out, we hope that there's a standing note somehow so it can stay top of mind for people over the coming months, and we can fine tune that in the coming.
Every other week, there's a Navigator newsletter that goes home.
Great.
So there'll be a highlight there about
Perfect.
where the district is in the process.
Perfect. You're way ahead of us. Thank you.
Been planning this for 3 years, Chris.
I love it. Item number 7, I think we're going to possibly talk more, but we we will be helping you in any way we can to look at the data and make sure that we're meeting your needs and parameters, obviously, but that you know what the market is driving right now in a very competitive superintendent market. So we want you to have all that information. We have a general sense right now of some comps for you, but we would be ready a little further down the road to put the most current information together for you. And to talk about, analyzing Dr. Mocha's current contract to maybe contrasting it to what are some current trends out there or some changes across our state. So that's down the road, but we would welcome any direction you have for us on that as well, or you'd like us to look into one thing or another. We're here for you to help make sure you've got all the information.
Thank you. I would say that in conducting that analysis, I would also welcome if you come upon information that causes you to reflect on parity across roles in our administration, as well as comparably with other districts, just so that when we do understand what it's going to take to attract a new superintendent, that we also have equity within the system for other role holders here in South Whitby.
Wow, that's a really good point. And we'll do what we can to do a further, more full analysis. It's an important data point, isn't it? Yes.
And we can also help with that if you direct where you want us to look for
Okay.
information. We can certainly pull that.
Do some legwork too. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is really talking about, okay, once we start to head into the actual selection process, how does that work? And we had mentioned in our proposal and how we operate, we want the board to see all completed applications. We don't do as a firm an initial screen and give you a slate. But what we do for you, though, is a whole bunch of background work. We do an initial quasi interview with each candidate, and we're doing as much reference checking as possible, as much online social media presence checks as we can. And then we will be doing a summary spreadsheet for you of all completed applicants and make sure there's a complete picture of everything that we were able to gather. And then you can see that at a glance. We would add our professional opinions of maybe where people might fall in a tiered system, just to, again, give you our professional judgment. But it's obviously the board's decision and the board only. So we'll talk about that more, about how you access all of that material as we get closer. So as we mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I
Marnie?
just wanted to ask, if we were to request it of you, would it be possible to provide the data about applicants with identifying information removed that might indicate their gender or their race to guard against implicit bias shaping our first impressions?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. Yes, we have definitely done that by, request. And we do a blind screening, followed by the rest of the information. We can talk the details with you later. We actually do a kind of a workshop around the whole screening process as we get closer, and we can talk about that. But this board has done a lot of training. I just applaud you in what you've already done together, but we will add our perspective and some of our resources to the conversation, and then you can decide, yes, blind screening. Sometimes it's a little difficult when just where they worked last is such an identifier. But let's work together on how you envision that. And we have done it with several districts.
Thank you. I'm glad that's
Yes.
an option.
Yes. So we talked also about confidential, not only the confidentiality agreement you're signing, but that the process remains confidential And I hope that your staff and community can appreciate this. It remains confidential until you select your finalists. And it's for multiple reasons, but primarily that you get the best, most comprehensive, complete pool of candidates possible. And we know that candidates choose not to apply, especially sitting superintendents, if their name's out there at a semifinalist stage. And that is still happening in a lot of places where the six, let's say 6 semifinalists, the names and resumes are out there, and then they move to 2 or 3 finalists. It's a big risk for their careers and their relationships in their communities. So that's our recommendation. Unless you direct us otherwise, we feel pretty strongly about that would result in the best pool.
That was one of our guiding ideals in our
Yes,
search firm search. So absolutely.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you. The announcement, as we mentioned, we took your suggestions, and that's the other handout in your packet, kind of in the middle. And it obviously needs a little bit of work graphically, so we will be sprucing this up, but we hope we captured, again, your recommendations. We'd love for you to give it just kind of one more look. But we took that Google Doc and what the edits were and incorporated all of those that we could. And we would love to get this posted by, if not tomorrow, then by Friday. And so if you, again, could scan it one more time, let Christy or Joe know as soon as possible of any other edits.
Tonight, if you can. Helpful to get it out there. And again, hearing from individual board members, your concern that the community hasn't had an opportunity to speak on what they want in a superintendent. This doesn't preclude that. There's the caveat there, that's to follow, but this gives people the opportunity to say, and this is what superintendents or others will do, to call and say to, whoever their friend is, hey, I heard, tell me more about South Whidbey. It gets it out into the public so that people can see if they're interested. They'll drive to the island. They'll drive around the district. They'll sit in, the local coffee shop. That's what people do for these kinds of high-level jobs in superintendencies. So I just think it's in the board's best interest if you can give the okay to let this get posted.
Thank you, Joe. That's exactly right. We, again, another methodology is that you do all of your engagement work and then you put your posting together. But you can see that would be a month down the road, at least. We prefer to have that one paragraph that says, we're doing our engagement work and more information to come in a leadership profile report. So stay tuned, folks. But it does exactly as Joe mentioned, just the sooner we can get it on the street, the better. And I'm hoping that we're the first one up on WASA by Friday, but which would be awesome. You guys are in the very first wave, and that's exciting. But any other thoughts or recommendations?
May I just offer a brief wordsmithing comment?
Oh,
In the passage about the district, the sentence South Whidbey provides choices in education, that sentence feels a bit stranded in the middle of a paragraph that's otherwise very tactical about physical locations. And I wonder if it might either appear earlier in the paragraph so that it feels more like part of the introductory matter, or if it might be removed entirely and instead say grades 6 through 12, as well as a 10 through 12th grade South Whidbey Academy SWA choice program are located in the South Whidbey middle/high school campus.
I agree that it does feel like it's kind of unnecessary with the listing of the choices right there. But I don't know if that's a particular sentence that applicants are going to be looking for or anything like that.
No, these two paragraphs for sure are really need to resonate with all of you. I would just defer to all of you and Joe and Christy.
I propose for those for whom time allows, immediately after the meeting, we all give it a silent read, a markup, and then hand them back to Dr. Moshe to collate our feedback.
Unfortunately, we have an executive session immediately
Oh.
following this.
That's right. So maybe after the executive session, if time allows.
I would say that I would like to have feedback or straight up okay by tonight. And however, whatever form that comes in, and then you can get it up in the morning.
Yes,
Does that
and
suit?
agreed. And since time is of the essence, I think that our time would be best spent by doing it quietly ourselves as opposed to editing by committee.
Yeah, just send it to me individually and Chris and I'll collate it. Chris and I will just collate it. It can't be, the substance is there. If you want to wordsmith it, feel free and
Yeah.
we'll get that incorporated.
That's great. That's really helpful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We look forward to getting that out there. And speaking of that, then how are we advertising, right? We talked about making sure that it gets into 4 places right away. And that is on your website, on HYA's website, on WASA and WASDA, and that will happen like right away. It sometimes takes WASA and WASDA 2 or 3 days, but I hound them. I might ask Helene to hound them too. She's, and so we want to make sure it gets up within a couple days and watch for that. And HYA has really become the clearinghouse nationally for these positions. I'm proud to say that. And not just for the ones, obviously, that HYA is facilitating. We host all superintendent openings across the country on our website. If you haven't looked at it, it's, map of the country and how many are open in Washington or New York, and then you can drill down. Then it says which companies are facilitating. 25,000 hits a month on that site, so it's got a lot of traffic. But what I did want to offer for you to think about, and obviously that's all included in this process, but there's an option that's in your packet that a lot of communities do want to just target some other possible candidates and make sure you don't miss them. But I would say anyone interested in working in Washington is going to be looking at HYA, WASA, and WASDA. So you're pretty well covered. But the only other thing I'd say take a consideration of is the handout. It's the one that has the survey on it, but inside it says advertising. Disregard that first page. So you're looking at the one that has a page 9 in the bottom right. And the only, thing that I believe has been beneficial for some communities is that middle section at the top of the page. And that's ALAS, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, very active community around superintendent positions across our country. And the National Alliance of Black School Educators, NABSE, again, very active across our country. And it's really a reasonable price if you wanted to consider that. So that's just a $520 for those 30 days of exposure. And sometimes it's just nice to show that you really do want to reach far and wide, but it's up to you because we have to do a couple extra steps to make that happen.
And is that $520 each or for both together?
Both.
Okay.
I think what I would add is, I know we're not giving I'll give you the language, Christy, but one thing that I wanted to add into the position summary specifically was a demonstrated commitment to supporting historically marginalized groups. I think that including that in our advertisement would be beneficial.
Yeah, thoughts on the additional advertising locations?
In my past experience in HR, it felt like a really important part of an equitable recruitment process to spread the word on as many forums frequented by people with historically marginalized identities as possible. And I think it would just be a good way to reach an audience, and it would also be a good indicator of our commitment to an equitable recruitment process. I'm also curious whether you have any familiarity with the Education Leaders of Color job board and whether that's a resource that is of value in this sector. I'm not sure if it is.
Go ahead.
There is a Washington for Latino, Latina administrators. So certainly, and WASA at one point was affiliated with them in getting a job board out. I don't know the current status of Black educators or color, but that would be really easy to look into here within the state of Washington.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would appreciate any extra effort to make an equitable recruitment process really robust. And I believe that personally, I would support an investment of $520 to reach those two boards that you mentioned.
Agreed. I'm seeing lots of nods.
Got a lot of nods. Okay, great. Thank you. That's easy to do. And we would just add that to our efforts in the next couple days. So stay tuned. Now, item number 12 is internal candidates, if there are any. We, again, just want to say that our recommendation is that we go through the same process as any other candidate unless the board directs us otherwise. But please let us know if you think differently about that. We just want to be prepared in case there are internal candidates.
I think that's even more reason for us to do a blind survey.
Okay.
So.
Agreed.
Great. So interviewing, we will again talk much more in our workshop preparing for the selection process, but you know, it typically works in 2 rounds. And I was looking at the board, none of you have been involved in a superintendent search yet, have you, right? Because Dr. Mocha has been here a while. So this is the first superintendent search for all of you. And so we're going to just be walking right alongside you. But what typically happens then, obviously, is during that confidential phase, you get all completed applications. You're reviewing those and coming to consensus on top 6, maybe. It says 4 to 6, but it's usually about 6 that can rise to the top. If there's not a clear cut line, it can go to 7 or 8 or whatever works for you. That first round, still confidential. It's typically a full day, like a 1 hour to 1.5 hour interview per candidate. It's your initial semifinalist interview. And then from there.
That board only, Chris?
Board only.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, just having been through this 14 years ago in this district, that is a little bit different. They had 5 finalists and we interviewed in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
Well, I should qualify then. Our recommendation is board only.
And that's
This is your
acceptable in terms
search?
of the privacy issues.
Yes,
I
it
mean, the public.
does. It does.
Okay.
You know, we have seen it work, although it gets dicey. If you do a fishbowl or an observer panel, right? And even if you ask all of these staff and community members to sign a confidentiality agreement, I mean, it just is more challenging.
14 years ago, there wasn't Facebook Live and Instagram
Yeah.
Live. And like if I was a candidate and I wanted to stay confidential, I would run away at a
Exactly.
fishbowl
Yeah, it was
style.
it was not clear to the candidates that that's what they were walking into, but that is what it was. And I still remember John Patton in the back row, right?
Was he making faces?
Yeah, that we are in a rain shadow. Anyway, it was a big lie because the first interview was in March and it was pouring. Anyway, good. I
Yes.
think that's really important that the first round is totally confidential with the board only. And then obviously once 3 finalists are selected, then
Right.
you do the
Right. And I think the sooner we can start talking about that, Christy and Joe, on the website and in your, yes, and to make sure that the community knows your chance to re-engage will be coming with the finalists. You're going to have multiple ways to meet them, ask questions of them, et cetera, so that people know that there is an opportunity coming. It's just not until the final. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Joe. Candidate expenses, we have time to worry about this, but maybe just plant a seed right now if you have a preference and or parameters you need to give us, because candidates will start to ask as we get closer. You've got some time though. Do you want to cover all expenses or up to 1,500, or, you pick the number?
Again, history.
Yeah.
First round was on the candidate to
Yep.
get here. Second round, the district provided the transportation and an overnight hotel room for the 3 candidates that were finalists.
Okay, that's helpful. And it's all over the board. I mean, each district's going to make their own decision there, but that would be pretty typical. So certainly time to talk together about that.
I would be in support of covering travel with a not to exceed.
Okay.
And I would do that for both rounds. I think if we're asking people to take time off work and to come interview, then the least we can do is be hospitable guests.
Speaking to equity again, I also believe that a class analysis of the hiring process would lead us not to create financial barriers to access for people for whom the financial implications might be more burdensome.
And it can also be, a gesture of, we really are interested in you and want you to come at the first round. And we're
Mhm.
going to provide up to, even if it's a $500, it's a gesture. You'll have to turn in your receipts, et cetera, whatever number you pick. But I appreciate that comment. Obviously, you're
Especially
with
because
your
you want it in
finalists.
person.
Yes,
You don't want to do remote for
No.
either one of these.
exactly.
Personally, I
Oh,
mean, that's my opinion. but-
Absolutely.
And it's not like it's easy to get here. I mean, it takes some effort. So I think, reasonable airfare coverage, no first class, but like, let's
Yes.
get you here, any transportation needs, whether that's them taking the shuttle or a rental car, and then hotel lodgings, and maybe like the per diem for food, the Washington per diem for food.
Ferry costs too.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
just go
again-
pick them up at the airport. It'll be quick.
Well,
Why
if they
don't-
come into Boeing.
Why don't
Field,
you think about that? And I'm saying, why don't we let Andrea take a lead here to check in with each of
And-
you and see what your preference is.
And check in with Paul and I around what's budgeted for the search so that we're being thoughtful.
Should I put passenger foot pegs back on my motorcycle in
I
case
think
there's a
so.
ferry line?
I think
Marnie
so.
picks you up in a sidecar.
That's good.
Oh, a sidecar. I would like that. Yeah.
So item 6 is background checks. And this one, again, just to clarify, John and Helene and I will be doing as much legwork as we can do. However, that's pretty limited. So are you interested in doing the full, third-party comprehensive due diligence background check? Boards opt in or out of that, and that's why we just have it as an option, and therefore it's also a handout in your packet that would be the last page.
I'm in here.
The little chart, and there's kind of 2 levels of option. One is comprehensive and one is basic, and you can see that the comprehensive goes a little further and covers national news media review and social media review. Again, much more in-depth than we have the capability to
If you're
do.
trying to avoid bias, that might not be what you want to do, but up
mean,
to the board.
We certainly want some form, which you're talking about providing at a lower level included, but I would be concerned with both travel expenses and the additional background checks affecting the cost of the search.
If I may, there was a incident I heard of where somebody was hired and they did the basic background. And had they at least done a news media review, they would have learned some information that would have definitely stopped that person from being hired, involving weapons and animals that would not have shown up on some of these things. So I think maybe we think about that and we maybe look at what we're talking about with Paul for travel and that, but I wouldn't necessarily
It could
rule
also
it
be
out.
that you get your 3 finalists, and upon final selection, it would be pending that, so that
Yes.
you're not spending that on everyone.
Yeah.
Can you do
No,
that?
Yeah.
Not, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry if that was,
Okay.
misunderstood. Typically, you would just do it on your finalist even, right?
Left
One
the one.
candidate.
Yeah.
So a few districts, in order to expedite the process, would do it on their final 3, just so that they're really ready to hit the ground running. But here's, as Joe was referring to, when you finish that full day in the district and you may or may not be ready to make a decision that night or the next morning, right? That motion that you make in public is that we're offering this position pending, a full background check and successful contract negotiations. Those are the 2 pending components that covers your bases should anything come up. And that a full comprehensive one takes about 7 to 10 days. And that typically aligns with what you're negotiating with that person anyway. So it works out pretty well. But no, most districts would choose just your top candidate. Thanks for clarifying that.
And would you say it's common or likely to lose a runner-up candidate because we didn't run a background check on them in a timely fashion, and then we learned that there was a blocking concern with the finalists' background check?
That's a really great question. We've never experienced it that I'm aware of. You get the information a week or 10 days. It's rare that the second runner-up, would have something in the hopper. We will know that. Who else is, what other searches are they a part of? And we're talking about that timing the whole way along the journey. Really remote chance of that happening.
Sure. I have been a runner-up candidate for some important jobs, and I will say that if they'd called me 10 days later and offered me the job, I would have rejoiced.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's great. Yeah, so again, this is something you can look at your budget a little further, a little closer, and what's your preference? And we can talk as we go along.
Have you ever had candidates push back against that bigger background check?
It's pretty common use now. The stakes are too high, and there's just been too many horror stories out there of a degree. We can't dig into verifying degrees from universities, for instance, or verifying doctoral degrees, et cetera. So it's just been a lot of stories. I think people just are expecting it for this level of a CEO position.
And theoretically, we could see how much money we spent on travel and then decide which package
Yeah.
we wanted for the finalist.
I don't really know what a budget is, but I do feel like at least the social media review seems kind of important to me. That's because that's where a lot of like political sentiment kind of comes in. Not that's like what we're looking for, but there's a lot of like, I don't know. That's where you find out a lot about people in this time and age. And I think it's kind of important to have that on there. And I feel like with news media and the bias, I feel like if we're mindful about how we're looking at the news, keep in mind that is biased, we can keep in mind that that is, not the greatest source, but also notify us of any like blatant things, as Andrea kind of pointed out.
Is he always this insightful?
He
Is-
is.
Okay,
is.
okay.
Yes, indeed.
I completely agree. I second your perspectives on that. And I would just say that the background check is far cheaper than a scandal.
Yep. Yes.
True.
I would also posit that what we find may not be a weed out issue at that point. But it gives us all the information to consider.
Exactly.
It,
Go ahead.
again, just sometimes, and this, I'm not sure if your firm does this, but questions that come up are things like, is there anything we're going to find that's going to embarrass this district if it becomes public? And that's a telling tale too. If they don't tell you and then you find it,
Exactly. That's what I was just going to share. In that initial interview we do, we do a remote virtual meeting with every candidate. That's exactly what our last question is. Please share now if there's anything in your background that could be of concern to this board or community. Talk to us now. May it disqualify them right there? Probably, most likely not, but you've got to talk to us about the circumstances around that. We have to be able to share with the board the rest of the story, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's done early. And it sure hasn't happened where something else came up in a background check that we weren't already aware of.
Well, and one of the first things that people are going to see in our ad is transparency.
Yeah,
That we are a district that values that
right.
clearly. And so hopefully that will resonate with any candidate who would come into this space.
Exactly.
I just think, to Carter's point of it's not necessarily needing to know somebody's, political values or political alignment, but for example, the district is signed on with the NAACP around, or no, ACLP around some, a lawsuit that would be protecting LGBTQ students and going up against some legislation and some policy. And that is something was a very fast yes from this board to
Mhm.
sign on to. And so if, we would want to know if there's anything that might cause the person who is also interviewing us as a potential fit for them, if they're not in alignment with those values, it would make it a very difficult position.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely. And that's part of the test, right? Is what homework are they doing on
Mhm.
who you all are and where you've been on this journey, for sure. Okay, great. Thank you. And you've already answered the residency question. The statement you put in the posting was perfect. I'd like to mention just the board portal quickly, and then we'll go back to the calendar, and we're getting there. So thank you for your patience. A lot of nuts and bolts involved. You may remember in the presentation, the board portal, and this has been really well received in districts where we've offered this tool. It really is just a repository of where we can keep all the materials of the search in one place for each of you. Password protected, board only. And it's where you'll access the application materials once we get there. And that's why it's important that it's board only. But again, then it's just one-stop electronic location for you to keep track of all the materials along the journey. So we just call it the board portal. We'll be giving you access shortly because we'll start dropping these documents in there as well. When we get close to the application materials, you'll be looking at 6 items for every candidate. And that's a lot of homework, and we're going to give you as many advanced days as possible to prepare for that. But any questions about the portal, or again, you may have some suggestions of what else you'd like us to drop in there, but it's a living document, living location that we can co-create. Okay, great. Well, then we're going back to the calendar, if you don't mind, and drilling down a little bit, making sure that the recommended dates that we have align with your wishes and goals here. We've talked with Joe and Christy initially just about this, and I might just start with the closing date, and then we'll work a bit back from there because as we've said, you are out front You're going to be the very first wave, and that puts you in a very competitive position. We were looking at, given the engagement phase and the recruitment phase, is there enough time to get this position out and then close on November 25? When you think about then the holidays and, what's your end goal? We thought we heard, you were hoping maybe for February-ish, and this gets us there. But if checking your comfort level with some of these proposed dates, does that closing date resonate okay with everyone?
When are the WASDA dates?
Which was the dates?
The
November?
conference,
Oh, like the 20,
Is it
18, 19, 20?
18, 19, 20 of,
20,
November.
21, 21
through
through
23rd.
23?
okay. So I like the November 25th close date because we could still answer questions of any potential candidates at that conference.
Yeah, and we will be there. We will be there as well. So it'd be great to be available for any other
We'll be
questions.
talking it up like we have been the last couple of years.
I do have a question. Do we want to push that November 25th date a few days back? So if there are people who are interested based on what they see at WASDA, they have time to put an application together.
Yep, maybe November 27.
Again,
Yeah, wherever
these
in there.
positions are not fly by night.
Yeah.
If somebody's applying for these positions, they're applying.
Okay.
You're not going to apply because you met a board member and thought, oh, that sounds good.
So I don't need to get ask me about my superintendent opening pin to where it was.
I don't think
I
wanna
think you
do
should
that.
still have it.
Well, you should start wearing it now. It's not November.
Perfect. I was bummed that I won't have time to wear it at the 2025 Technology Access Foundation
Oh.
convening, which is a neat conference for educators.
Up to you, though. We can certainly slide it till the next week. You're good?
No, I think that's a well taken point by Dr. Moshe that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So again, working back from that, you can see that we're working on engagement right away. As I mentioned, John and Helene and I are hoping to get back over here in a few weeks, let you get school started and your flood taken care of. But we would like to just immerse and get to as many people as we can, conclude the evening with an open forum for anyone who wants to come and meet with us and answer these 3 questions and interact with us, right? We give them an overview of the dates and what to expect coming up, et cetera. So right now we're looking at maybe coming back over on the 19th of September. And if you see any problem with that, just please let us know, because we would be scheduling all of these constituent groups, as many as we could. If we need to stay until the next morning, that's possible too, but if we can get them all in a day and a night, we can.
That's our middle high school curriculum night. So I chat with Christy. I don't know if there's overlap 19th to 20th. I don't know, but there you go.
Or is a curriculum night a good night to have a table out?
That's a good question.
Feel free to.
And just a paper survey or a QR code?
Absolutely. And just information card, what to expect in the process, and then, QR code or.
Be next to the ice cream table and you'll
Okay.
get everyone.
If we
Thank you.
did the 19th, 20th, then Susie, could you host a coffee hour that 20th and they could be at the coffee hour?
I've got the schedule already established, but I'll double check
Okay.
and see we could do an extra one for
Mhm.
sure.
The next morning?
Yeah.
Oh,
Morning.
okay. The 20th. Oh,
Mm.
that would be great.
Is that when you'll work with admin and focus groups, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping to schedule as many as we can, but if we need to come, obviously, another day
Okay.
too, we're just going to work around everyone's schedule.
And did you come up with a date for the evening, or is that off the table?
No, same day we were hoping, but you
For
know,
that
I don't know.
evening, not on a board meeting evening. Is that changed, the forum date? Okay, good. That's fine.
Tell me what else is in you're thinking about that.
So Christy and I, and
Yes.
again, you already spoke with her, but we had come up with an off Wednesday
Yes.
evening for a forum, just an open forum. But if that's not part of a good plan, that's fine with me. I'm just wondering about dates. That's
We
all.
might need to do both. If we're going to hook on to curriculum night, we may need
Right.
another night for the forum as well. So let's keep
Yeah.
talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally flexible as long as we can get it on the calendar. Whatever
Okay.
you think is best, as far as I'm concerned, we'll,
Okay.
it's,
Okay. And again, Christy has kind of just scoured this to make sure that the proposal aligns with your current board schedule. We tried to align it as best we could with your current board meetings. But again, we're totally flexible. So the big ticket items would be, certainly when we present the leadership profile report, and given that we are coming on the 19th, most likely, and that we might launch the survey, whichever survey model you choose, and have it open for a couple weeks, maybe the 23rd of September through October 4, for instance. Just a thought. If that's the case, we would have your leadership profile report ready before November 13. We could possibly come to your October 23 board meeting to present it. Then it's out, also posted a little earlier than if that sounds good.
And that would give candidates a full month to really look at what that says.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I would also just add that we as a board are well aware that this is time intensive and it's very important. It's like one of the most important things we do. So we appreciate you trying to coordinate with Christy, and Christy will just tell us when and where to be.
Okay.
As long as
Awesome.
Christy doesn't tell me to be anywhere when I'm on vacation in Scotland this summer.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So again, once it closes, we're presenting the candidates on the 11th of December. The actual interviews on January 8th. Now, this is one that you'd need to check your availability because, as I mentioned, that's typically the full day, right? Because you're going to have 6 or 7 semifinalists at an hour or an hour and a half each. And so I would just, rather than do this by committee tonight, do the same thing as just to let Joe and know if you have conflicts.
up night. So it's just a full night.
Okay, and we could adjust the start time if you're already scheduled to stay late. I don't know what's on your agenda for that day, but
I couldn't tell you.
okay.
It's January.
And right now, we don't have specific dates, but soon we'd want to nail down the January days in the district. And take a look at what I noted there. Historically, it's been the 3 finalists, then you take up 3 full days. We have since learned that there's some real benefit for a lot of reasons to collapse that. And it's less impact on the system, for one thing. You're also ensuring more consistent participation, right, and voice. Because if you've got 3 community forums at night, how many community members or staff are really going to commit to come all 3 nights? What percent? Maybe, a good percent. But in other words, we have got some great models where we can make it work on either 1 day or 2 days, and it just collapses it, and it's a rotation through your district, and it lessens the impact to the schools, and it ensures.
Superintendents that went through the 1-day model that I can talk to and
Yeah.
get feedback.
Yes. Talk to you about that.
I can certainly, because again, that's not a today decision.
Yeah. Yeah, again, by then, who your competition is, right? It's all public. So it's not like we have to protect them from running into each other like we used to worry about. So it's just the trade-offs of what feels better, and boards are making those decisions all over the map. We can do the logistics.
And it
either
takes
way.
away that primacy recency stuff too. Because you get them all on 1 day. and
Exactly.
Just see them. And it also, again, it's not a lesson in stamina, right? That's not what it's very hard as an individual to go from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, on. That's not the superintendent life. And people have said, oh, well, if you can't handle that, you can't handle the job. Nobody does that. I mean, I know it's busy and there are times when you work long days, but it's not like that.
Yeah, and the hours are certainly that, but the intensity, right? And expecting them to be on their A game for 14 hours straight. It is, we've seen the evidence of the impact. So there's some other ways that we've made it more humane. If they're going to be spending the night, for instance, anyway, because of the distance they travel or it's hard to get here, another model is to have an afternoon, right? And maybe the board's initial interview is the afternoon of the first day. And then there's maybe the community forum that night. Then they're meeting with staff and students and families and community the next day in a variety of ways. We split it up, in other words, with an evening, they can sleep. And then it's been really beneficial to see after all that happens, there's a board exit interview. It's not the same kind of interview intensity. It's just a conversation. Okay, now you've been through this gauntlet. Talk to us about what you learned, or do you have any follow-up questions for us? Or we might have some follow-up questions for you of things that have come up. So think about that. We'll be ready to fine-tune what that looks like in January, a little further down the road. Anything else about that? So that gets us to, board action, official board action by February 26th.
I also want to talk about student representative involvement. I would like to discuss with the voting members of the board not having an advisory vote on the finalist for the student reps because they will be your superintendent. And if you vote on the record for or against someone, it could lead to some uncomfortable final year or final 2 years. I would suggest that we get feedback from the student representatives in an executive session. But I also want to hear from the student representatives and other board members on that.
I think
I would disagree on that. Just saying, because I think it's a really big decision and something that definitely deserves input, and not just input in the way of me saying it to you guys, but me actually declaring my status. And I feel like it's good because we always have the option to abstain if we want to, but I feel like we should at least have the option to, if we want to, cast a vote. Because I feel like we could end up with two, options. One which students really support, and one which students wouldn't feel as great about, And in that case, students' opinion definitely deserves to go on record. But I feel like there's definitely the option to abstain, and we can hold that. That's how I would view it.
I would be in support of having an executive session with student rep input, but I would caution us to remember that this is a personnel decision and has legal consequences, and it may not be legal for student reps to be giving advisory votes on a contractual agreement.
I don't know that it's not legal. It's just, I also am curious about when it's board only, is that 5 board members and 2 students for those 6 interviews? Or are you going to hold the students out, which however you do that? It's probably best to not have them in the 6, only because you don't want anybody compromised in terms of confidentiality. Not saying that you would, right? But it just gives the appearance. I guess I don't think it's not legal. I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't think it's not legal to have them give you an advisory vote.
I just think of when we vote to continue your contract, I don't believe we do advisory votes on the continuation.
We haven't done that in 3 years, but
we gave advisory votes.
We certainly don't have students evaluate the superintendent, but I know you've gotten feedback, right? So getting feedback.
But I will just say, for legal action, when you vote to take litigation against that one legislation that was anti-trans, we voted on that with advisory votes, and that's just as legal, I would feel like.
It's not personnel. It's not personnel.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about the legal ramifications as Dr. Moshe said, but I am concerned about the last year or two of your school careers with a superintendent that maybe you didn't vote for. And whether that would be an actual problem or a perceived problem. Yeah.
I would argue, Brooke, that if we experience that, that would not be a person we would want to continue employment
I
with.
agree.
So
You could argue that all the way through. Do
Yeah.
you want your principals, you only have 3 of them, do you want them giving you an opinion on who their superintendent should be? It's not going to be public, right? It's going to be a collaborative scoring or whatever you do, but there is something to be said for not getting individuals publicly to say it. This is the board's decision, right? When you come out here after you do all the discussion about all of their credentials, it's going to be a roll call vote. Who do you pick, right? And you're going to say candidate 1, and somebody may say candidate 2. But you, in my opinion, and that's all it is, you should take the heat. It's not that your student rep shouldn't give you input, but they shouldn't, none of us, none of your employees should take the heat.
I would not have the superintendent vote on this. I would, or provide an advisory vote. I would have you provide advice, but not an advisory vote. I
And
wouldn't.
not
Yeah.
publicly.
Yeah.
What's your experience, HYA representatives who are right here, with working with student representation and student board members?
Yeah, thank you for, I was just waiting for the opportunity. Carter and Callahan and I, we talked about their involvement this afternoon. And obviously we know student voice is very important to this board and this community, which is, I applaud you again. And there's a lot of ways that these two and all students can have their voices heard. And that maybe, let's just play this out on the finalist day when they're in the district. It's tours of the schools, and maybe these two are leading those tours with another group of students. And, you know, we're gathering student feedback throughout the day. And we track online feedback live through a Google Doc so that the board only is observing that feedback throughout those 2 days, let's say, right? And you're watching that, but we're also gathering maybe handwritten feedback forms from the students, and you invite these two in to your executive session to just share their impressions and what their, you know, fellow students are saying, and let's look at the student feedback together, and then you excuse them. Is what we have seen work well. You're honoring the student voice, you're processing it with your 2 reps. And
I
going
would
from there.
absolutely want that at a minimum, whether or not there's an advisory vote. I would absolutely want that at a minimum. And this can be something that we discuss over the next month before we come to a final decision on that. But I just wanted to put that caution of mine out there so it can be discussed. I understand the desire to have a voice, whether it's advisory or simply advice. And I do want to honor that, but I also want to be cognizant of part of the role, as I see it, of board members with student representatives is to protect them as students from the possibility of community hue and cry.
Well, that's why I'd say put it up to the students and say we can have an abstain vote, which would be the go-to probably, or we can have the vote candidate 1 or 2. But I feel like the option. That's just what I advocate for.
I would be curious to see if there are other students, like when y'all go to WASDA or when you have, you know, when you're involved in, you know, your student leadership spaces, what their experiences have been in terms of this process and how they felt about that. You know, a little reconnaissance mission might be interesting to do as you're, you know, thinking this through and as you are continuing to grow as leaders on a state and national scale. Like, what should it look like when a new superintendent is going to come on board to a school district? And what what should student voice look like? What could that process be? And what are the pros and cons of each style? So I would give that to you to do with what you will.
Yep, Carter, I really appreciate your perspective and thank you for sharing it. I wanted first to say that my gut says that both from a sort of an HR standards of practice perspective and also from a student safety perspective, that I believe that my gut says the people with the legal responsibility to hire a superintendent should be the people who make a public statement of preference for a candidate. That said, I really love Director Johnson's recommendation that you learn from your colleagues on other student representation boards where we might learn from other examples, because in some ways I think that our district has been precedent setting with the way students participate at the board level. And if we have peer districts who are also raising student leadership to this level, I would love to hear if there have been examples of good student participation at the board level in a process like this one. So if you're willing to do that reconnaissance, I would really welcome the feedback you can bring.
Okay, I just wanted to get that out there. I think that that would be a fantastic thing to get some more information on what other student reps have done. I agree 100% with both of you. Okay.
That covers our agenda, and we covered a lot of territory. Thank you all so much for the thoughtful discussion. It gives us a lot of direction. We still have several things pending, no problem. When you're ready to address those, we'll get to them. But this allows us to launch tomorrow, and that's going to be very exciting. We just have to say again that the district is such a special place and it has such a strong foundation, and the work that you have all been doing over the last years is phenomenal, and that is only going to play into attracting, you know, the best candidates. So we're excited and very, very hopeful. So we hope you are the same. We're here for you for the whole journey, and please reach out anytime. We'll get you these notes from our conversation tonight just as soon as possible. And Helene and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well for coming out and for this very detail-oriented and complete walkthrough of the process and the choices. And we will owe you final feedback on the job posting by tonight.
They're going to stay through the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on our workshop agenda, which is the 2023-2024 budget extension discussion. I'll turn that over to Dr. Moshe first.
Paul alluded to it when we met last, and we do need one. So I'm going to have Paul talk about why that is and what that looks like. And then the vote on the budget extension would be at the next meeting, and it would require a budget hearing just like the regular budget.
Yeah, so when we looked at the budget status in June, it looked like we were encumbered like 101.5%. I went back and looked at it, and I've been working with AP and payroll to try to adjust the encumbrance the best we can, and it's going to be really close that we're going to go over. But if we go over by $1, it's a finding. So this budget extension just gives us $550,000 of capacity so we can get through August and get through year end in case we have to move things, accrual things and things of that nature. But if part of the process, the ESD had me adjust our apportionment to match what it's actually going to be. So we have a budget amount. So when you look at this schedule, you see that it's increasing budgeted revenue by 521,000 and budgeted expenditures by 550. But this is only the state generated funding. It doesn't include our local funding, which is actually coming in a little bit better over budget, but it's not going to run through the budget extension just for my time's sake to get it through. So we may go over if we don't do this, or we may not. It's still, there's just a lot of things that happen at the end of the year as we timesheets and all that stuff. It's hard to make it nails today until we actually run August payroll, which won't be till around the 20th. But it's just adding capacity. We have the additional revenue. we have the additional expenditures. We didn't budget for transitional kindergarten because we didn't know if we were going to do it. That's a big part of this. And we brought on some paras to help with our special ed needs midway through the year or at the very beginning of the year that carry through. So that's some of the causes that's bumping us right up against our budgeted expenditure. So this is just it's not as formal as the budget. So this is kind of an open conversation if you have questions, but that's why I'm bringing this forward and asking for the capacity.
It's not an unusual ask. We've done a budget extension most years. Because what happens is, like Paul explained, we add things after the budget has been finalized. And so there is a little bit of capacity, but not the capacity we needed. We added not just the TK and the paras. We've discussed a particular high cost issue in the past. So there are things that impacted the fund balance, which the money is there. And as you see, we also have the revenue from those things that we that we added because the enrollment is there.
The TK funding is here in that federal special purpose and state special purpose. That's part of the reason that it's not all of that 400,000 and change, but parts of both, because we started TK as federal funding and then it switched to state. So both those things are going up this year as unbudgeted revenue because we didn't know if we were going to have that program until late. So
After the budget was
after the
approved.
budget was proposed.
I think it makes sense, Paul. I mean, I run budget revisions 2 or 3 times a year.
Yep.
It happens. It's what we would do in our personal checking account.
Yep.
It's what you do.
I just see this as the district adapting throughout the school year to changing conditions. So yeah, I agree. This seems pretty normal. Also the bottom line, 28K, it's like 1% of the budget. So it actually seems, fairly nominal.
I think it's like 0.1%. Yeah, I think it's 1/10 of a
Off by
percent.
Not to
decimal
mention,
place.
you have a lot of audits to live up to, man.
Yeah.
So we can't have this one take you down right away.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with this at all. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually impressed with the finesse with which the district navigated the changing waters this year. And this feels like just a good practice to prevent consequences that we neither want nor need.
Okay, thank you. So it'll be on the next board meeting for formal adoption. Well, there's opportunity for comment at that.
Yeah, it'll be under new business.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Field. We'll go to our last item, which is the upcoming WASDA annual conference. I'm going to turn this over to Director Greenhair to talk about what's going on.
Thanks. Yeah. So as you may remember from a previous meeting, we submitted 3 proposals to speak on 3 different topics at the WASDA annual conference, with the plan of only speaking, no matter how many of those 3 were accepted, to only actually present 1, just to limit the time and energy spent by the board and the leadership. So 2 of the 3 were accepted. And so we need to decide which one of these 2 we will end up presenting. The 2 topics are the how we passed the bond and how we engaged the full district on co-creating the professional communication plan. Or sorry, not plan, policy.
So yes, Mrs. Phillips, you're off the hook. Yeah, for now. We'll come back to excellence in curriculum later.
Yeah, I think so. Just in terms of how to decide, I think we are more unique statewide in having passed a bond on one side, although on the other side, the board itself, as a board, we had less of a pivotal role in passing the bond. It was more of like a community organization, community-wide organization. On the other side, with the professional comms policy, that seemed like a very unique process as far as I know. I had never seen anything like it at WASDA. And so I think we may have a more unique, and we took a more active role in that. But I don't think there's a clear winner. So I want to get the whole board's and the community's opinion, because we will be representing the entire district, which includes our community.
I personally lean more towards our policy because I think we have examples where we've replicated it across multiple policies. And I also think that yes, the way we did it was very different. And we really substantially changed that while still remaining in alignment with WASDA's proposal. Chris, some things that we did was we shifted it out of the personnel numbers and into its own so that it wasn't perceived as disciplinary, but more so of a code of conduct. And we got feedback in on the language from staff, students, families.
Yeah, we did forums.
It was really intended to build more of, to have equal amount of protection for staff as it would for families and students. So that the staff would feel empowered to call that policy and to support them in tough situations. So I feel like that makes us pretty unique in how we did that.
I would also say that just logistically, since we're in Spokane this year, right? If we were in Bellevue, we could invite community members to come maybe for the day if we were going to address the bond issue and do a workshop there, because it was a huge community effort. But since we are, having to travel across the state, I also think that just logistically doing the policy one makes more sense. I also think there's a big opportunity for us to include our students in that.
Absolutely.
Because now that we have had that policy for a while, I'm hoping to hear, that there's anecdotally that there's been some impact in how that may be, changing the face of communication district-wide. So I think that there's lots of opportunities to frame that policy work into a workshop that, well, I'll just say for me, a workshop experience for me is when I can take nuggets of truth back to my space and immediately use them in some way. And so I think that frame is a really great opportunity to share what we are doing and show the pride of all that, we set precedents around here. And that is amazing and wonderful. And what can other districts take home? What can other board members take home, either personally in their hearts, or what can they take back to their board the next week and start to implement?
I recall experiencing presentations at prior conferences about how to pass a bond, and I found the information valuable, but I don't think of anything I could share that would be additive to what I had learned in previous years, except for quippy anecdotes about going to school in these buildings with Brooke last time they were substantially renovated. So I feel like the policy work we did was much more groundbreaking, although the bond passage achievement was a big lift. It also leaned on known community efforts that can support bond passage. I'm sorry that we're such a unicorn in having passed a bond, but I do think that good information has been shared on that topic in years past.
I also think you can have 7 people and the superintendent in the room presenting, which is unique. I just hope we don't get the last session on the last day.
I agree that I think that the policy presentation is the stronger of the two, and the one which has more transferable information.
All right. It sounds pretty clear cut. So yeah, I will accept our invitation to present on the professional communication policy and decline the invitation to present on the bond. Thank you, everybody, for your input.
Thank you for doing that work.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
welcome. Okay, unless there are any other comments on that, I'm not seeing anything on Zoom from anything. So I will now end the workshop format, and we will convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations for no more than 1 hour. No action will be taken during the executive session. Thank you very much and good night.